The marble floor of the Ashford Conservatory's Grand Hall had never echoed under shoes like as before. Eli Mercer felt every eye in the room turn at once. 200 donors in tuxedos and gowns, crystal glasses frozen halfway to lips, a string quartet that had been playing softly near the fountain slowly losing its rhythm, one instrument at a time, until even the cellist forgot to finish a phrase. He kept walking. His daughter's hand was small and warm inside his. She wore her good shoes, the ones with the scuffed toes she always tried to hide. He wore the same gray button-up he ironed every Sunday night. Neither of them belonged to a room built from imported stone and old money, and everyone watching them knew it. Nora tugged his sleeve. "Dad," she whispered, "why is everyone looking at us?" He didn't answer, not because he didn't hear her, because the answer had taken 11 years to build, and somewhere at the front of that room, beneath a single white light, it was about to finish. To understand why a piano technician and his 9-year-old daughter were walking to the center of the most expensive room in the city while 200 people went silent, you have to go back 6 weeks. If stories like this move you, stick around. We tell the real ones every week here on Real Single Dad Stories. 6 weeks earlier, the Ashford Conservatory was just a building that needed fixing, and Eli Mercer was the only one who knew how to fix it right. He arrived at 6 a.m., before the sun cleared the rooftops, while the hallways still smelled like floor polish and yesterday's rehearsals. He carried a toolbox that had belonged to his father and a thermos of black coffee that had belonged to no one but necessity. His first stop was always the same: a battered, beautiful Steinway grand piano the staff called Old Bertha, parked in the corner of recital hall, be like an old woman nobody had time to visit anymore. Cracked veneer, 3 dead keys, a soundboard that hummed wrong on every C-sharp. Eli opened the lid the way other men opened a Bible. He didn't play, not where anyone could see. He just listened, fingers resting light on the keys, head tilted like he was hearing something underneath the sound that nobody else could. Nobody at Ashford knew that 11 years ago, those same hands had won the Hartwell Young Artist Prize, the kind of award that opens doors to Vienna and New York and a life most people only watch in documentaries. Nobody knew, because Eli had never told them. After his wife Denise died, the silence in the apartment got loud in a way no metronome could fix. Nora was 3 years old and needed breakfast made and shoes tied and a reason to believe the world was still steady. Concert halls didn't offer health insurance. A conservatory maintenance job did. So Eli put his name on a different kind of application. Piano technician. Steady hours. Quiet work. A man could disappear into a job like that. And for 5 years, that's exactly what he did. He woke at 5:30 every morning. He braided Nora's hair himself. Badly at first, better now. While she ate cereal and graded his work like a tiny, merciless judge. Crooked, she'd say. Do it again. He always did it again. He walked her to school. He worked nights tuning pianos for kids whose parents wrote checks larger than his yearly salary. He came home, made dinner, helped with homework, and once Nora was asleep, he sat in the dark kitchen with bills spread across the table like a losing hand of cards he kept playing anyway. He never complained. Not once, not anyone. His father used to say complaining was just tiredness with nowhere to go, and Eli had nowhere to go, so he simply didn't. What people at Ashford didn't notice, eventually, was a piano in Hall B. Old Bertha had been unplayable for 2 years before Eli came. Slowly, without anyone asking, he brought her back. New hammers, restrung bass register, a soundboard repair so delicate the previous technician had refused to even attempt it. Students started requesting Hall B for practice. Nobody asked why the piano suddenly sang again. They just assumed it always could. That, more than anything, was about to become a problem. Director Whitfield Cole ran the Ashford Conservatory the way some men run anything they didn't build themselves, like it was a stage built for him to stand on. He wore his suits a size too sharp and his smile a size too wide, and he had exactly one talent that mattered to him: making donors feel like geniuses for writing checks. The conservatory's biggest check belonged to Maxwell Sterling, a soft-spoken philanthropist who had quietly funded half the music programs in the state and never once asked for his name on a wall. Sterling was coming to see the restored Old Bertha before the conservatory's annual Founders Gala, the single night that decided whether next year's scholarship fund existed at all. Cole needed that piano to sound perfect. He needed Sterling impressed. And he needed, more than anything, to be standing in the room when it happened. The morning of Sterling's visit, Cole found Eli kneeling beside the open piano with a tuning lever in hand. "Step back when he gets here," Cole said, not looking up from his phone. "Let me handle the talking." "Yes, sir," Eli said, and meant it the way he meant most things, without resentment, because resentment cost more than he had time for. When Sterling arrived, he ran his fingers gently across the keys, and the room filled with a sound that hadn't existed in that building in years. "Warm, even, alive, remarkable," Sterling said quietly. "Whoever restored this understands more than mechanics." Cole stepped forward smoothly. "We brought in real expertise for this one, Mr. Sterling. I oversaw the entire restoration personally." Eli stood 3 feet away, toolbox in hand, and said nothing. He had learned a long time ago which battles were worth the cost of his job and which ones weren't. Nora, waiting outside after school, let her in early that day, watched the whole exchange through the cracked door. She didn't understand boardroom politics. She understood one thing clearly. "Dad," she said later, walking home, "that man said he fixed the piano, but you fix a piano." "I know, baby. Why didn't you say so?" Eli looked down at her, choosing his words the way he chose every screw in that old soundboard, carefully, so nothing would crack later. "Some things aren't worth arguing about in the moment," he said. "Just because somebody takes credit doesn't mean they took the truth." Nora considered this with the seriousness of a 9-year-old deciding whether justice had been served. "That's not fair," she said. "No," Eli agreed. "It's not." He didn't tell her it was about to get worse. 3 days later, the real trouble started, and it started with a piano string that wasn't broken until someone needed it to be. Cole had quietly approved a 6-figure restoration partner invoice for a company that, as far as Eli could tell from the paperwork left open on a desk one night, hadn't actually done any restoration work at all. Eli noticed a discrepancy the way he noticed everything, without saying a word. He didn't go looking for trouble. Trouble found him on a Thursday afternoon, 2.5 weeks before the gala, when the celebrated young pianist scheduled to debut on Old Bertha, a rising star named Daniela Reyes, withdrew after a wrist injury. Cole panicked in a particular way men panic, when their image, not their conscience, is what's at risk. He needed someone to blame. He found Eli in Hall B, mid-tuning, and didn't bother lowering his voice. "What did you do to this piano?" Eli set down his lever. "Nothing's changed since last week. The board register is sharp. Sterling's people will hear it tonight." Cole's face had gone a particular shade of red that comes right before a man says something he'll regret only because it gets repeated, not because it was wrong to say. "I should never have let someone like you handle an instrument this valuable in the first place." The hallway outside, Halby had a few students passing by. They slowed down, the way people do when they sense a moment about to turn ugly. "I haven't touched the register," Eli said evenly. "If something's off, it happened after I left last night. Convenient story. It's the truth." "People like you," Cole said, lowering his voice into something meant to sound private and landing somewhere far worse, "get one shot at a place like this. I'd think hard about how you want to spend it." Nora had come in early again, waiting on the bench by the door, and she heard every word of it. That night, walking home, she was quiet for 3 full blocks before she spoke. "Daddy, did you break it?" "No, baby." "Then why didn't you tell him he was wrong?" "Out loud? In front of everybody." Eli stopped walking for a second. The question landed exactly where a 9-year-old's questions always land, directly on the thing the adults have been carefully stepping around. "Because being right isn't always the same as winning," he said finally. "Sometimes you let a man say something false about you, because the moment isn't about you. It's about everybody watching, deciding what kind of man you actually are by how you carry it. Nora frowned, unsatisfied, the way children are when an answer is true, but doesn't feel fair. I don't like that, she said. Me neither, Eli admitted, but I like keeping my job. And I like you having a roof. Some nights, that's the math. He didn't sleep much that night. He kept thinking about the invoice he'd seen on Cole's desk, the fake restoration company, the number that didn't add up. He had the kind of proof that could end a man's career in one phone call. He never made the call, not out of fear, because somewhere underneath the exhaustion, Eli Mercer had decided a long time ago that the kind of man his father raised wasn't the kind who burned down a building just because someone inside it had wronged him. There were kids in that building, scholarship kids, kids like a girl named Tasha Brooks, 14, who was about to lose her spot in the program over one missed tuition payment her mother couldn't make. So instead of making a call that would have destroyed Cole, Eli started staying 2 hours later every night, teaching Tasha piano for free in Hall B, on the instrument nobody but him understood. He didn't tell anyone. Some things you do because they need doing, not because they need an audience. The truth has a strange habit of surfacing exactly when the people hiding it can least afford it. It started small. A janitor named Reuben, finishing his last shift one night, caught 2 minutes of Eli playing alone in Hall B. Really playing, not tuning. Hands moving like memory. He filmed it on his phone without thinking much of it, posted it online with the caption, "Our night janitor is secretly incredible," and went home. By morning, it had 9,000 views. By that afternoon, 40,000. Local, modest, the kind of viral that doesn't change a life by itself. But it changed enough. Maxwell Sterling's assistant saw the clip forwarded in a group chat and froze. She'd spent 2 years as a junior researcher for a classical archive before working for Sterling, and something about the hand position, the phrasing, the particular way the player leaned into the left hand on the bass line, snagged a memory she couldn't place. She found it after midnight, an old recording, grainy, 11 years old, the Hartwell Young Artist Prize, final round. A 27-year-old competitor named Elijah Mercer, playing a piece by Chopin with the kind of restrained fire the judges had called a generational gift in the program notes. He had won, and then, according to every record she could find, he had vanished from classical music entirely. She brought it to Sterling the next morning, not as gossip, but as a question. Why would a Hartwell Prize winner be tuning pianos in a basement? Sterling didn't answer right away. He watched both videos side by side, 11 years apart, the same hands. He didn't go to Cole. He didn't go to the press. He simply asked quietly that the conservatory's piano technician be present at the Founders Gala, not in the back hallway, but in the room. Cole, hearing the request secondhand and badly, assumed the worst, that Sterling had somehow learned about the fraudulent invoice, and that Eli, the only person with access to those records, must have talked. He hadn't. But Cole didn't know that, and a guilty man rarely waits for proof before reacting. 2 days before the gala, Cole called Eli into his office and told him, without much explanation, that his services would no longer be required after the event. "We're restructuring the technical staff," Cole said, not meeting his eyes. "This isn't personal." It was entirely personal, and both men knew it. Eli said only, "I'll finish the piano before I go." He went home that night and told Nora the truth, because he never lied to her about the things that mattered. "I might lose my job after this weekend, baby." Nora sat very still at the kitchen table, the way she did when she was working something out. Because of the man who lied about fixing the piano? Something like that. "That's not fair," she said again, the same word from weeks earlier, except this time her voice cracked a little at the end, and Eli understood that she wasn't just repeating herself. She'd been carrying the unfairness around since the first time she said it, waiting to see if the world would correct itself. "No," he said quietly, "it's not, but I need you to know something. We're going to be okay either way. I promise you that. Not because I have a plan, because we've been okay before, when things were a lot harder than this. Nora nodded slowly, but she didn't look convinced, and Eli didn't blame her. He didn't know yet that the piece nobody could fully hide anymore, his own history, his own hands, his own name, was already moving through people far above Cole's reach. The night of the gala, the Ashford Grand Hall glittered with a particular kind of light that only exists where money has nowhere else to go. 2 hours before doors opened, the evening's true emergency arrived. The replacement pianist Cole had scrambled to book a competent but unremarkable graduate student, called to say she had food poisoning and could not perform. Cole stood in his office with the phone still in his hand, staring at a program already printed with her name on it for 100 copies. No time to reprint, donors arriving in 90 minutes, and absolutely no one capable of performing the showcase piece on Old Bertha. He thought briefly of asking Eli. He dismissed the thought instantly. The man tuned pianos. He didn't perform on them. And besides, Cole had already told him his contract was ending. Asking him now would mean admitting he had nowhere else to turn, and admitting that felt, to a man like Cole, worse than the gala failing entirely. So he said nothing and hoped the night would somehow fix itself. It didn't. Maxwell Sterling arrived early, as he always did, and found Cole pale and pacing near the stage. It took less than 2 minutes of Cole's stammering explanation for Sterling to understand exactly what kind of hole the evening was standing in. "There's a solution in this building already," Sterling said. "Sir, you're a technician. The one in the video everyone's been sending me." Sterling's voice stayed even, the way it always did, but something in it had hardened. "Where is he tonight?" Cole hesitated. "He's not scheduled to perform. He's staff." "Tonight," Sterling said. "I'd like him to be more than that." It wasn't a request a man in Cole's position could refuse, not without explaining exactly why he hadn't already thought it himself, and certainly not without explaining the invoice Sterling's accountant had quietly begun asking questions about earlier that week. A thread Cole did not yet know had already started to unravel without Eli saying a single word. Eli was in Halby when Cole found him, doing one final check on the piano he'd spent 6 weeks bringing back to life, Nora sitting cross-legged on the floor beside the bench, drawing a notebook because she'd had nowhere else to be that night. "Mr. Sterling wants you in the main hall," Cole said. The words seemed to cost him something physical to produce. "He'd like you to play tonight, the showcase piece, on this piano." Eli looked up slowly. "I'm the technician." "Tonight," Cole said. "Apparently you're more than that." For a moment, neither man said anything else. 11 years of silence stood between them, and Cole, for the first time since Eli had known him, looked like someone waiting to be told what to do rather than someone telling others. Eli looked down at Nora. "You up for an adventure, baby?" Nora studied his face carefully. "Are you in trouble?" "No," he said, and for the first time in weeks, he meant it completely. "I don't think I am." This is where the story catches up to itself. The Grand Hall doors had not been built with men like Eli Mercer in mind, and every chandelier in the room seemed to know at the moment he and Nora stepped through them, hand in hand, while 200 donors slowly stopped talking, one conversation at a time, until the only sound left was the quartet losing its place. "Dad," Nora whispered, "why is everyone looking at us?" He still didn't answer. Not because the question had no answer anymore. It had every answer now, 11 years of one. But because some things you don't explain. You let them finish, and they explain themselves. They reached the small flight of steps at the front of the hall. Sterling stood near the piano, watching them approach with an expression that wasn't pity and wasn't curiosity. It was recognition, the look of a man who has found exactly what he suspected he would find. Cole stood several feet back, arms crossed, jaw tight, the posture of a man watching his own evening get rewritten in real time. Eli let go of Nora's hand only long enough to settle her in a chair at the edge of the stage, where she sat with with her notebook clutched to her chest, eyes wide, taking in the size of the room. She was suddenly the center of. Sterling stepped to the small podium at the front and tapped the microphone once. "Most of you came tonight to hear about the future of this conservatory," he said. "I'd like to introduce you to it first." He gestured toward Eli without ceremony. 11 years ago, a young man named Elijah Mercer won the Hartwell Young Artist Prize, one of the most demanding honors in classical performance. Then he disappeared from every stage in this country. Some of you may have wondered tonight why a piano technician was standing near our showcase instrument instead of in the back hallway where we usually keep the people who actually keep this place alive. A ripple moved through the room. Not laughter, something closer to hell breath. The truth, Sterling continued, is that Mr. Mercer lost his wife 5 years ago and chose, without a single complaint, without a single request for recognition, to raise his daughter instead of chasing a stage like this one. He took a maintenance position so he could be home for bedtime. He restored the very instrument you're about to hear, alone at night, after the rest of us had gone home to lives a great deal easier than his. Cole's face had gone the color of the marble floor. Beneath him, "I want to be very clear about something," Sterling said, his voice never rising, which somehow made it carry further. "Nobody rescued Mr. Mercer tonight. He built every part of what's about to happen. We simply finally noticed." He turned toward the piano. "Mr. Mercer, whenever you're ready." Eli walked the final few steps alone. He sat at old Bertha, the piano he had rebuilt string by string, key by key, with nobody watching and nobody thanking him, and rested his hands on the keys the way he had every morning for 6 weeks. Except this time, 200 people were waiting to hear what those hands could do. He looked once at Nora. She looked back at him with the same unguarded attention she'd had her entire life. The look that had never once asked him to be anything other than exactly what he was. He began to play. It was the same piece from the Hartwell recording, 11 years older now in his hands, heavier in places it hadn't been before, because he had lived 11 more years since he last played it. Years of grief, of 5:30 mornings, of crooked braids redone until they were right, of bills spread across a kitchen table, of choosing, every single day, to keep going without ever once being asked to. The room went still in a way that had nothing to do with etiquette. When the final note faded into the chandeliers above, nobody moved for a full 3 seconds. Then the applause arrived all at once, the kind that doesn't build politely, but breaks like something finally let loose. Nora was on her feet before anyone else, clapping with both hands raised high, grinning the way only a 9-year-old can when the whole world finally agrees with something she already knew. Justice, when it finally arrived for Whitfield Cole, didn't arrive because Eli demanded it. It arrived because the truth, once it starts moving, rarely needs help finishing the job. Sterling's accountant had already flagged the restoration invoice days earlier, and within a week, an internal review confirmed what Eli had quietly known for a month, that Cole had approved payment to a company that never performed the work, pocketing the difference through a private consulting fee routed back to himself. Cole resigned before the board could vote to remove him. Nobody at Ashford ever heard him explain himself, because there was nothing left worth explaining. Eli never told anyone he'd seen the invoice first. He didn't need to. Some men's choices catch up to them with, or without an audience. What mattered more in the weeks that followed was smaller and quieter than any scandal. The conservatory created a new position, artist in residence and head of instrument restoration, and offered it to Eli not as charity, but because no one else in the building could do what he did, and everyone finally knew it. Tasha Brooks kept her scholarship, fully funded this time, and kept her Tuesday lessons in Hall B, except now the door stayed open and other students started showing up to listen. Eli still woke at 5:30. He still braided Nora's hair, better now than he used to, though she still occasionally declared it crooked out of pure habit. He still packed her lunch and walked her to school most mornings, because some routines don't change just because the world finally noticed you. What changed was smaller than people might expect. A few months later, Nora sat beside him on the bench in Hall B after school, working through a simple piece far below anything her father could play, frowning hard her own hands the way she frowned at everything she took seriously. "Dad," she said, not looking up, "why didn't you ever tell anyone you could play like that? Before all this?" Eli thought about it the way he thought about most of her questions. Slowly, honestly. "I didn't think anyone needed to know," he said. I just needed you to have breakfast and a roof and somebody who showed up every day. That part never needed an audience. Nora considered this, fingers still resting on the keys. But it was good, she said, what you did, even when nobody saw it. Yeah, Eli said quietly. I think it was. She finally looked up at him, the same unguarded look from the night on the stage. I know why everyone was looking at us now, she said. It wasn't because we didn't belong there. No, Eli agreed, resting his hand gently over hers on the keys. It was because we did. They just hadn't noticed yet. Outside Hall B, the evening light came in low and gold across the old piano, the same one nobody had believed could sing again. Nora pressed one more key, slow and steady, and the note hung in the room a long time before it faded. The kind of sound that doesn't need anyone watching to be worth making. Goodness can go unnoticed for a long time. It is never wasted. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and stick around. We tell more stories like this one every week, right here on Real Single Dad Stories.